Hello everyone, if you are a fan of the channel, you would know that I just recently moved down to college for my second year. For a while, I was considering either disassembling the fish tanks or having one of my parents take care of them. Finally decided that the tanks were just too beautiful and that I would have my parents take care of them. So in this video, I will be returning home and we're gonna see just how well they have been keeping them up. Alright, so of course I've already seen the tanks, but I will show you guys. So this is what we're working with. This is my 20-gallon right here. This is just one of the 3 that I have in my room. And then over in this direction, this is my 5-gallon. This is the worst one by far, which I will get into later. And then over here, this is just my very tiny one. This is a 1.7 gallon, which I really don't consider a tank that much. But yeah, this one is doing the best, like, water clarity wise. But yeah, let's get into each one of them. Alright, so I'm gonna start off talking about the 20-gallon. Now, this one really is not too much of a concern to me. Obviously, the only issue that we have going on here is just the accumulation of algae on the front piece of glass, but that's really nothing too crazy. And it's only because this light started glitching a little bit. Timing options were kind of wonky for a few weeks, so that's why there's that buildup of algae. But I'll get into more of that later. And then over here, obviously, you're going to gasp when you see this. This is not, of course, what I was intending for it to look like. I'm gonna have to make some mega changes and procedures, unfortunately, for my parents to do when I go back to college. But I'll explain why that got like that later. And back over here, this one's doing perfectly fine. Obviously, I don't have any like major livestock in here. I do have some snails and a little Nubius, but I just have to work on the water level, which, as you can see, we've had some issues with while I was away. But back to the 20-gallon. Now, besides the algae that you see here, one crazy thing, first thing that I noticed, other than the algae, when I first glanced at the tank when I got home, I have an outbreak, which I didn't even know this was possible, of limpets, freshwater limpets. So I started looking closely at the glass, which you can see perfectly right here, right here. They're pretty much everywhere, like there. And I was like, well, that's not a snail because it has a flat shell. I didn't see any like roundness or like any like dome shape type of shells. And immediately I thought, well, it looks like a limpet, but I actually didn't know that limpets lived in fresh water. But now I do. I did some like research. So apparently I have an outbreak of these little guys, and they're not too much of a concern. It's pretty much like the same thing as having like a snail outbreak. They're herbivores, so they are going to clean up the glass and the algae, but at the same time, you don't really want a major outbreak of anything in your tank. Then as far as the fish go, if you guys have watched my fish tour video, you would know that I have rummy-nosed tetras in here, I have some cory cats, and then I have a gourami. Unfortunately, we did have one fatality of the rummy-nosed tetras, which I kind of saw symptoms going on right before I left for college, so it is a little bit expected. But I need to get him out of there ASAP because I did just notice that. Okay, so I just got our poor little rummy-nose out of the tank. But back to the tank, obviously I'm going to clean it and I'm going to show you that in this video. One of the major things that will be an issue for me though is that I kind of had to pick and choose my battles as far as what equipment I would take to school with me and then what equipment I would keep home. So I'm very limited with the equipment that I have to clean the tanks. Of course I have like right here, I have my gravel vacuum siphon to clean it, but I don't have like a razor blade algae scraper, and I don't have like my long tweezers or long scissors to like cut anything. So what I do have is this little algae scrubber. Of course, it's not like the best model of algae scrapers that you want. It's not gonna scrub it as precisely as I would want it to, but it's gonna have to do, especially in the tank behind me, which needs major maintenance. before I get into cleaning the tanks, I just want to hit on this tank one last time. Now, of course, before you go racing to the comments, very upset about the way this looks, the only reason it looks like this is because right before I left for college, I believe I left this light on without turning the timer. It was like right before I left for my flight, and I wanted to turn it on to the 6-hour interval, and I think I just accidentally turned it on permanently, and my parents didn't really notice this until I guess it got bad. They were feeding them every day, but they weren't very familiar with what it's supposed to look like, and then one day I got a FaceTime that it looked like this. So there's no algae really on the walls that much. The fish are fine. That's all that matters. The fish, I have 6 neon tetras in here. They're doing great. They look beautiful, vibrant colors. They just ate. But of course, we need some mega changes in the tank, which I can easily fix within minutes. This is also the first time that I've ever had my parents take care of the tanks for me. So I'm very new to this. This is not something that you can be like, oh, well, you should have known. I didn't know that it would ever turn into this mess. It's really no big deal. I know that sounds crazy, but they're perfectly fine, and just because a tank isn't crystal clear doesn't mean that it's disgusting. And that's not all cases, but some cases it doesn't necessarily mean that the tank is, awful. But for future references, of course, when I go back to college, I am going to have to teach them how to switch this out. And I will have to teach them how to do water changes, because I was trying to see how it would play out if I could make it with no water changes, just turn the lights on low to make sure there's no crazy algae outbreaks. Obviously that hasn't worked out too well, so I'm gonna have to make some tweaks to the procedures that I give to them. One more thing I wanted to add, right here, I actually had a 4th tank. That's the one that I just made a video on, so this one actually traveled down to Florida with me. If you guys watched my fish room tour video, you know that I had a tank here. But yeah, that one is now down in my dorm room. So I got our water changing kit and gear, and we're gonna start off doing some changes to our 20-gallon. Alright, so we're already looking somewhat better. You could tell that the water is not dirty at all. It's actually doing pretty well. My tidal filter is really doing a great job. And it was just that front wall of algae. I actually do see some there, so I'll clean that up now. And then I'm going to begin with the actual draining of the water change. So I cleaned the walls pretty much as I could squeeze that massive sponge into. But another issue that I forgot to mention about this tank, these plants that I have, which I'm currently blanking on their name, they have a really hard time sticking in the ground, rooting themselves into the gravel, which is partially my fault because I chose such very large pebbles for the gravel and the sediment, but that's besides the point. So I'm going to have to, unfortunately, stick those in with my hands, which is not my favorite thing to do. This is why I wish I had my, large, long tweezers with me. But I'm gonna do that when I get my water change halfway done. So once I have lowered all the water that I'd like to, that's when I'm gonna do that. Over on the side here, I do have some decaying leaves from my Amazon sword, which I'm just gonna have to use, I don't know, a kitchen scissor or a garden cutter or something for that. Of course, I'm gonna wash it before I put it in a tank, but I'm gonna do that now before I get the water change going. Now it is finally water change time. Now I'm gonna try my best to stick these plants back into the gravel. So at this point, I've now tried my very best to plant all of those with my hands in the back. We'll see how they work out. And by the way, if you have any other suggestions as to how to propagate those things, I never really learned, and I kind of just YOLO it and just stick them in the ground, which is probably not the correct way. I'm not sure. But if you have any better suggestions or tips, please comment. But as of right now, I'm gonna start filling it back up with water. Now, as I'm in the middle of this water change, I figure I'd show you what those limpets look like. So let's see if I can get, there we go. So as you can tell, they are not snails. They don't have like that round shell. They're very flat, and that's a characteristic of a limpet. So pretty interesting. I didn't know those could form in here. I'm actually kind of excited about it because I love all forms of marine life, but I'm probably gonna have to figure out a way to not have them cause an issue. I also have these snails, which if you know what it is, or if you can even see that, comment. I haven't really taken the time to identify those ones, but it's really just a snail party in this tank. All right, tank is all filled up. I put all the water back in it, all nice clean water. So this is pretty much all I'm gonna do to this tank. There's really nothing more I can do, except one thing I will do is actually, I need to correct the lighting settings on these. What you see now actually is not even what the overall lighting of the tank is supposed to look like. I only have whites and blues on right now, as you can tell right there. But they're not like set to any levels. It's just like the default. So I'm gonna put timing and levels and the duration, and I'm gonna have to kind of set that now for the timer, just so it's good and we don't have any more algae outbreaks when I leave. So now I have changed all the lighting settings. You could see I have a different like gradient variation of lights here, which is what it's supposed to look like. And I only run it for like 6 hours a day, just because I really do not need any algae breakouts, anything more than would possibly happen if I was here. And I will check in once all the debris in the water has settled down to the bottom, just to show you the final outcome of this tank. Now it's time for the worst one of all, which I honestly don't think will be a hassle at all to clean. I'm gonna have to do a pretty massive water change just to make sure I get all the gook out and whatnot. For this one, I think it's less algae on the walls and more just algae in the water column, and just different debris and dirt in the water column. So I'm gonna go ahead and do the water change now for this. All right, so there's really not much that I can do as far as algae scraping in this tank. This is where my algae scraper razor blade came in handy, because you could see there's like crevices right here that are really thin. And quite frankly, I don't want to stick my hand in this tank just yet. So I'm probably just gonna go ahead with doing a water change, which is what I'll do now. Okay, so change of plans. I forgot that I had 2 toothbrushes that will probably do a pretty good job. So that's what I'm gonna just start doing right here, and they're actually working perfectly. And that is absolutely disgusting. Now, while I'm doing this, just please know that I have this plan to fly home for quite some time. If I thought that I was coming home around like Thanksgiving, then I would have had my parents act on this ASAP. But knowing that I would be home within just a few weeks, I figured I would just let them do minimal things to the tank, and then I would rescue it within the next week or so. So that is pretty disgusting. It's not the same algae in my 20 gallon. This is cyanobacteria, blue-green algae. Pretty gross, kind of carpets the gravel, which is just even better, but I'm trying my best to kind of just get this into the water column, so once I do my actual gravel vacuuming and siphoning, I could just suck it right out. So I scrubbed this thing down a ton just to get the algae off of that too. I did that with the toothbrush. So yeah, now I really just have to suck all of it up into the siphon, and then hopefully we'll be heading in the right direction. Also, another thing I want to add, the tank has only been like this for like a week and a half. It started getting really, really bad around that time, so this hasn't been like an issue for months on end. Like, these fish are not getting tortured, so don't worry. Okay, so now I will start taking out all of the water. So I had to do a pretty decent amount on this tank. That's about 50%. And just in case you're wondering what the water looks like, yeah. So this was in desperate need of a rescue. But I'm gonna try to scrub the walls a little bit better now that I have like more view. I should also probably turn the filter off as well. But yeah, and then I'll start filling it up and we'll see what it looks like. Now I figured I would mention it, but if you guys are interested in knowing what type of microfauna could possibly live within your tank, especially when you find yourself cleaning things like this off of the wall, I actually have made a video describing, going into detail, and putting all of those microfauna under the microscope. So in one of my tanks, when I was back at college, I actually made a video on it and went into detail, identified all of it. So if you're interested in that, and maybe you want to know something that's in your tank, go check that out. I'll put that in the cards above. But yeah. Alright, so I'm going to fill it up now. Hopefully I don't disturb the plants too much. I am absolutely terrifying the fish, but that's inevitable when you're doing the water change. Alright, so this is what we're working with. It's better, definitely better, but still have ways to go. I'm gonna fill it up a tad, just very slightly more. It bothers me when I can still see the water underneath the rim. And then I'm probably just gonna like swipe back and forth with the net to just clear out all of the leftover algae that's in the water column. Okay, so filled it with water again. I'm kind of just hoping that all of this stuff will get sucked up by the filter and even just flow to the bottom, and then I can pick it up again later. And that will hopefully increase the clarity of the water. But that's just about as much as I can do. I'm going to continue like netting some of this stuff too. But I just don't have the correct tools to like pick everything out a ton. But yeah, so we're going to see how this works out. But for now, we're going to move on to the last tank, which is our tiny one right there. So as far as being clean, this tank is perfect. I don't see really any issues with it. There's like really no algae at all. And the visibility is perfect. But my mom did tell me that when she was filling it up, which is really the only direction that I gave her for this tank, when it was being filled up, that it was pouring out of here. As you can see, there's like some leftover residue from that. So I'm gonna inspect it, figure it out, and then I'll come back and tell you what was wrong with it. Really funny that I thought I would point out. So this is what I call my snail jail, actually, because anytime I find a snail in any of my other tanks when it's not supposed to be there, I'll just chuck them in here. It's usually just like bladder snails or those other unidentified snails that I have. And I realized, so this is like the bottom half that livestock is not supposed to be in, but they must have crawled through like the filter when they were juveniles, and now I have a ton of bladder snails living in the media section of this tank, which is pretty funny. So I found our issue. This is it right here. And then in there. So basically, I would assume from the looks of it that the filter that's in there is not working, because this is the cord for the filter, because of that. So I'm gonna try my best to clean this off. Hopefully it's not completely damaged, and there is another USB. I'll put it into the cleaner one there, but I'm still gonna clean that one out too. Okay, so unfortunately I have come to the final conclusion with this tank that the filter is actually broken. So because there was no water getting pumped out of this, whenever you topped off the top, it was sinking right into here and then just overflowing. So that is it. That's the end of this tank. The thing was, you know, $40, and there's clearly some damage to it. So, oops. I'm probably just gonna ditch this, and then with the few days that I have here, I was thinking of getting like one of like these bowls, I don't know, I think those are like cute, and I'm not looking to put, of course, any fish in it or anything like that. Just more snails, overflow of snails, and then like that little like Anubias right there. So I might do that, but it's a shame that it's broken. It had a good run. I've had it for around 2.5 years, I think, now. So yeah, but that pretty much finishes it up with the tanks. So this is how my 20-gallon turned out. I'm really pleased with it. And with the limited equipment that I had, I think it did a pretty good job. Of course, this algae is very stubborn here, especially that blackbeard algae right there, but I'll reduce the timing even more. These plants are beautiful. A lot of new growth since I've been here last, so yeah. But I think the 20-gallon turned out really well. Now, the 5-gallon, obviously, it's not going to look picture perfect or crystal clear like the other one, just because of where we started off with this tank. Hopefully within the next few days, this cloudiness clears up, filter sucks it, or, you know, it goes to the bottom, and then I could just clean it again a little bit more. I'm still going to try and clean up these areas right here. And I, for the most part, got all the algae off of the walls of the tank. But now I know better. Definitely before I leave, I'm going to have to double check, make sure I have the right timing options for that so I don't leave with a permanent light on. And like I said before, the fish they're doing great. So that's my main concern. Of course, I want this to clear up as well. But it's an experience, it's a learning thing, because this is, like I said before, this is the first time I'm having my parents care for the tanks. Last year when I went away for college, I actually disassembled them. But then this year, I was like, no, they're too beautiful, gotta keep them up, so we're gonna keep running them as long as I possibly can. So now I know that I might have to have them do a little bit more than just topping the tank off. Maybe change the filter media, do slight water changes. So yeah. Alright, so unfortunately we did go 1 for 3 with the fish tanks. I was hoping for a little bit of a better outcome, but clearly that was not the case. The 5-gallon was obviously the worst one by far, and I will definitely never let a tank get to that point again. Like I mentioned before, this is a learning experience. This is the first time that I've had my parents actually take care of the fish tanks for me, which I'm super, super grateful for, but we will have to make some changes. I'm also going to be home again in the middle of October, and then for Thanksgiving, and then for Christmas. So I'm going to have several times where I can come home and check in with the fish tanks if anything goes wrong. But if you've made it this far, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you again in the next video.